Hello everyone, I'm Liliana with the Craft Studio Season of Reads and Holiday Decor, and today we are going to make a geranium lantern swag. So before we get started, we're going to go over all the materials that you need to make this beauty happen. So of course, the first item that you're going to need is this geranium spray. The second item that we're going to use is going to be this greenery. It is actually a rice grass bush. Now you could use whatever greenery you like. However, this is going to be the main focal point that we are using. You could use a geranium bush, but in this case we're using a swag that's going to make it a little bit easier for you. And you'll see what I mean. Also, as an additional greenery, we're going to use this thistle. To add that beautiful touch to it, we have this gingham. See that red gingham? It is a 1.5 inch. And then finally, what I personally like to use to add a bow that we're going to be creating are pipe cleaners. These are the main items that you need in order to create this. Now, the next items that we're going to go into are your tools. So the tools that we will be using are the following. First, the main one that I love to use is the floral wire cutter. This is very handy. I use it all the time. I cannot create anything without this. This is what's going to help you cut your floral bushes, your greenery. Even if you're working with grapevines, you're going to be using this to help you cut the grapevine. This is the main one for me. Next, you're going to be using a scissor. This is mainly for your ribbon. If you're gonna make a bow, the way that I make it, you're gonna be using wire. Does not matter the color, does not matter the gauge. In my case, just have some floral wire. Zip ties. These particular zip ties are 7 inches. Corded wire, coiled wire, rustic wire. This type of wire is what we're gonna be using. You only need about 20 inches. We're going to be using this to attach the lantern swag to the lantern. Finally, a glue gun with glue sticks and your mat. You need something to to help you measure something. If it's a measuring tape, if you have some just notches on your table where you need to have some kind of measuring device so that you know how we're working. And those are the tools that you need. Now, when creating a lantern swag, the first thing that I like to create is the bow. The bow is a driving force, and it's actually the anchor point that creates everything, that pulls everything together at the end. It's the design, it's where your eye goes to because it adds that extra little bit of oomph, right? Okay, so we're gonna make a small bow. I personally like to make 10-inch bows. You'll see what I mean as I'm working when I say 10 inches. 10-inch bow definitely a lot of times means that you're working with a smaller wreath. That's not going to be a smaller swag. Doesn't mean it's going to be a ginormous swag. But even if, it depends on you. If you want to keep adding product to this and making it bigger and fuller, it is up to you. I'm just showing you the basics. You make it your own, okay? Okay, so the first thing when we're making this bow, let's make sure, the one item I forgot to say is a measuring mat, right? You need a mat or something that you need to measure. It's not required, but if you know how to measure, or if you have marks there or a measuring tape that you are able to follow along, then perfect. Okay, so the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to pull this out, and I'm going to measure about, I'm actually going to do about 15 inches, right? 15 inches. That's going to be the first tail that we have. And if you see this, I'm holding actually the outside of the ribbon in, and facing the inside of the ribbon is facing downward. Now, I am a right-handed person, so I like to hold my ribbon on my left hand because I like to work with my right. So I'm switching it over. See that? Okay. Now, the first thing that I'm going to do once I'm holding that is I'm going to twist it. It's a little bit more difficult to explain because the ribbon has the same design on both sides. But basically what you want is the outside to be facing outward. And you could actually see it. If you look at your ribbon closely, you'll be able to see that the seams are sealed in. and you want that to be inside. So that's technically the inside of your ribbon. If it had a design on this ribbon, you'll be able to tell that the pattern will be. So just imagine that there's a design and this is solid on the inside. That way it'll be a little bit easier for you to understand and to work with it. Okay, so now I'm going to measure 10 inches. Now, when somebody says a 10-inch ribbon or a 10-inch bow, what they mean is bow. What they mean, sometimes it's referred to as 5 inches. It just means that you're measuring 10 inches and you're folding it. See that? 10 inches, 10-inch loops. Once I'm holding it like that, I'm going to twist it. Again, imagine that we have a design in the back. So you want the design to be outside. So that way we could fold it in. We're doing the same thing again, 10 inches. And right there we have bunny ears. See how easy? We already started making a bow. Very, very simple. Now that we have that, we're just going to keep doing the same exact thing. If at any point you lose track of where your bow is, where exactly the loops are, or better yet, what's the outside of it, feel free to unravel it. Feel free to take a moment to stop and look so you could say, oh, do I need to twist it or not? And that way you know where you are. I'm measuring 10 inches again. And one thing that I have to make sure that I say is that make sure that your ribbon loops are even. A way to check that is to see how I'm pinching here with my fingers. I'm going to be working with everything in these 2 fingers. What I'm going to do is whatever's on the left and on the right, I'm going to tuck them like this. I'm going to pull them, put my fingers in, and make sure that that's even. If at any point, all you have to do is like wiggle your fingers a little bit, fix it. And the reason that this is important is because if you're making your bow and you realize that your bow looks lopsided, it just means that you're probably holding it incorrectly, or that your loops were uneven, a little bit longer than the other one. So try to make sure that you're doing this. See, this one seems a little bit longer. So before I even move on to the next one, I'm just going to pull that a little bit more. So that way I make sure that my loops are pretty even. I'm going to twist again. 10 inches. We have 4 loops at this point. Twist again. Now you could make this as big as you want or as small as you want. Just remember that general rule of thumb is odd numbers. So if you're making a bow and it's going to be what I like to personally call a poofy bow, a lot of times it's just easier when it is odd numbers. Okay. I'm fixing my loop on this one because this loop seems to have, there we go, this loop was off. And again, this would not happen if it was something with a design. Okay, so keep going. Now we have our tail. That's it. We have 5 loops. I'm gonna do 7. However, I'm going to cut it because I want it to be more tails. I want it to be a little bit more oomph to it. So I'm going to take my scissors. Take out. And I'm going to cut this. I'm going to leave it long, but I'm going to cut it. I personally like to leave ribbon tails a little bit longer because from there I am able to decide later on if I want to cut them. We are able to add more tails if you made it short and then afterwards you wanted to add it longer afterwards, add a longer tail. You're able to just hold it from behind and add tails. But in this case, I'm just going to make them a little bit longer just to start. I want there to be ribbon tails in the other direction as well. So I am going to, same fingers, hold in that direction. And I'm going to make another loop. 10 inches. So we're going to have 7 loops on this one. I realized I wanted to have I love to have these little short tails on it. So I made that loop. Okay. We turn it. It's the same process over and over and over again. We go to the 10 inches. And once we get to that, we're cutting this one. We're able to decide how big, how small, how long, how short you want them to be. If we want it to be a little bit shorter, we could decide that later. But here, if you see what we did here, we ended up leaving these short little tails up the top. Okay. So now what I like to personally do is I like to close my bow, or rather finish off my bow with floral wire. And as I'm looking at this, I think I want to add one more piece of ribbon in the back. But we can add it later, so you'll see what I'm doing. So let's just finish off this bow. And if we want to add a little bit more to the wreath, to the swag, we could do that later. You'll see. So I'm taking my ribbon. I'm sorry, your wire. Your wire does not have to be any specific color because you're not really going to see it. I chose the green on purpose because we have all this greenery here that it's going to be hidden anyways. And we're also working with a pipe cleaner that's going to be used at the end. So we're not going to see it. That's just in case you happen to have some leftover floral wire that's gold from Christmas. Feel free, go ahead, use it. We're not going to see it. Now, before we tighten this, please make sure to do these little loops, measure them, because you do not want it to be short or lopsided, right? I made about 4 loops. I wrapped it around four times rather. That's a better way of saying it. So once I have that, I'm going to cut it. So I'm going to belong there. And once you're happy with it, twist it. Don't go too crazy with how tight it is because it is wire. And if you get a little bit too tight, then you're going to break it. So try not to break it. Okay? See how long that is? See if I think I wore the wrong color today. You try to see that. So I'm gonna cut it about 1/2 inch. And once I have it like that, so you can see it against my cheeks, then I'm gonna push it down. Be careful because if you cut yourself with this, got a little prick, it kind of feels like, well, you got a pinch from the doctor. Okay, and there's my bow. There's my bow. So now we move on to, I'm not going to say the fun part because everything about this is fun. But see how cute this is? And this is a red gingham ribbon. Cute, cute, cute. Okay, I'm going to place that aside and we're going to move on. Now we have to work on our swag. This is the fun part. Okay, the bow's fun too. I like making bows. Okay. So this spray. First thing, remove the tag, please. Remove the tag. So we have a few ways that we could do this. When I make my lantern swags, I like there to be a tiny little bit just popping up at the top, right? Just picture the lantern swag. A little bit at the top and then it explodes at the bottom, right? And then the anchor point is going to be your bow. See that? Now, I'm staring at this because you could simply bend this down and then use your zip ties to secure it. Right? We could do that. See that? That's all we need. So what I'm gonna do is, yep, well, let's just keep that. We could bend it. If you want to, you could cut it. But then just remember that if you cut them too short, it's gonna be a little bit harder to work with this. See that? Because then you have to zip tie them. I mean, we're going to zip tie, but it's just gonna be smaller pieces that you're working with. So it's gonna be a little bit harder for you. So I'm gonna bend it exactly what, you see what that piece is? If you got the same one, if you happen to get this exact same piece, you see that? Or wherever you have that, if it's similar, just bend it. It doesn't have to be the same floral, but you see how we did that. Okay. And I'm going to cut this right like in between. It probably is going to go a little bit shorter, but in between the two florals. And I am using my floral wire cutter. Okay. So we have that. And this little guy actually came off the flowers. Oop, I don't even know where it came from. It's okay, we'll glue it back on afterwards. I think it slipped out. Yeah, it slipped out. It's okay. Okay, so now this is the fun part. We are going to lay this guy out. Use your mat. You do need your mat. So we're gonna lay this out. And you're basically going to create your swag here on the table. This is where you're going to start adding all the pieces that you want and all the elements that you want to add to it. So I have this greenery, and I'm going to cut a few pieces. Like, how many do I actually want to pop up through here? This particular greenery is, we call it up and down. It moves up and down, which just means that you're able to move the different parts of the greenery by just pushing it up and down. Literally, that's what it is. Then I'm going to place it underneath. Like, how do I want this to look? How many do I want? Remember, this is simple. This is a simple one. The next item I'm going to take, well, the same thing. I'm just going to cut another one. And this one, I'm going to push it a little bit more up because I'm going to go to the top of it. Like, do I want that there? But do you see what I did here? I pushed it a little bit more up. And the one on this end, because remember, I want kind of like a little explosion, we're pushing it a little bit more down. We want I personally want the bottom of it, when usually we want the bottom of it to be a little bit bigger than the top, because the top, when you're placing it on your lantern, the top is going to be small and it's just going to explode towards the bottom. So you just picture it like a little bit hello up here, and then it's just wow at the bottom. So I'm going to add another one. And we have two here. I'm going to add it on top of it. And we're just laying it out. Once everything's together, then we can move things around, twisting. That's the beauty of working with faux florals. That when you're working with your florals, you're able to move them around. If you're doing this with natural florals, it's gonna break. And I've done it. So that's why I just lay it out. And then afterwards you can play with it and make things look beautiful. It's already beautiful. Make it pop out a little bit more. Now I am moving to this cute little bundle that we have here. I'm gonna cut this. And this is thistle. The thistle has 3 separate pieces to it. See that? See how it comes apart? So it makes it that much easier to work with. It's amazing. All right, let's throw out our garbage. So how do you want this to pop out? I always, whenever I separate or I cut my branches, my bushes, I end up separating to see how many of each do I have. Do I have something that's a little bit smaller? Do I have something that's a little bit different? So that way I know, like, okay, the small one I don't have to cut. I can just add it to the top. In this case, they are the same. We have 3 of them. So what I could do is, we could use the whole thing. We're going to take the first one up top. Maybe it might be a little bit too much. You might want to cut something off. But for now, let's leave it. And I'm actually going to move the flowers and put it behind, because I want the flowers to be the focal point. And then I'm going to use these. And we have 2 left. And just place it up top. One is right on top and the other one I'm going to lay it underneath. We have this beauty that came in also. Why not? Add it. You have your stuff, just add it. Make it a little bit more fuller, right? Why not? So I'm going to add this one. See where I place it? I place it up top. Okay. So this guy right here, and I'm not even measuring. If I were to measure all the way where these blades are, you can't even see my hands here. I see about another 3 inches from the top here. My mat is 24 inches. So I'm already 3 inches more up here. And then up here is like another 3 inches. So if you add 6, it's about 30 inches. We're looking at about 30 inches. Granted, when you start bending and everything, it tends to shrink a little. But this is what we have for now. See that? Okay. So now, I want you to make sure that you know where your zip ties are. Grab onto your zip ties. We'll have them close. And what we're going to do is, we're going to hold this in our hands. You could do this in your hands to start with. But I like to build it out so you know what you have. If you also want to put it together while it's down with the zip ties, add it while it's still down, you could do that as well. I'm holding it, it's a little bit crazy of me. But you see what we have so far? Stepping away so you can see a little bit pretty, a little bit easier. And sometimes a little bit easier when you're building it to work with your hands because you know what you have in your fist. If you know what you have in your fist, what fits, you're actually able to move things up a little bit, make it a little bit smaller. Because why do I not want what fits in my fist personally? Is because that's where my bow is going to go afterwards. And you really don't want a lot of empty space. Even though we're going to move things around afterwards, you don't want empty space. So I'm going to actually tuck this in a little bit. So remember I said it's going to get a little bit smaller once we start playing with it. So we just shrunk it down a little bit. Now it's about 25, 26. See that? So again, if you're working with it, you could just start in your fists, in your hands. You don't have to, but I just like to lay it out when I'm teaching it so you could see and get a visual about what you're working with. When I'm building them, when I'm making them, a lot of times I just start making it in my hands. And with time, you'll be able to do the same. Okay, so now we have to get that zip tie, the first zip tie. And I'm just going to start adding it. And you're probably going to miss some. Just keep adding zip ties. I end up usually adding a lot. A lot of zip ties. That's how many I add. I add a lot of zip ties. And if you don't want to commit to it fully yet, don't make it super tight. Make it enough that you're able to move things around still. If you miss something, like this little guy here still was missed, use another zip tie. But just get the visual of how much space you have above it. Because if I add this bow to it, do I have too much space up top? Do I need to add more florals? If you have another one of these, you want to add another one of these? You want to add more ribbon to it to fill up those spaces? Does that make sense? So maybe you want to compress it a little. Remember, this is a simple one. It's easy. Very simple. But with the simplicity, you're going to have also a pretty item. And also, I am moving things around because I want it to be layered. Excuse me, I don't want my florals, because this is an awesome spray, the geranium, it already came in the layer where you already had one up higher than the other of the florals. But I don't want all my thistle to be all on the same level. I want some to be a little bit higher and some a little bit lower. Okay? So now let's tie these together. Let's continue to tie and secure it. Once you're happy with it, it's not going anywhere, right? Anything that's a little bit too long, we're gonna cut. So take some time to cut those that seem to pop over. Let me find my full wire cutter. And we're cutting them if we're confident that they are not, it's not gonna affect the integrity of the swag. Like it's not gonna fall apart just because we moved something. We're cutting things off because we feel good, that it looks good, and these are just extra pieces that need to go. And once you get to this level, maybe you actually may want to add another another zip tie. See, I see this little guy over here that looks a little bit loose to me. It's only being secured with one zip tie. I'm gonna add one more. We want to make sure that this is not going to go anywhere. And always remember which is the front of your, okay, which is the front. In my case, this is my front because I knew that I had put the geranium up front. Okay, alrighty. And remember, we could always move things around. So finally, because we feel good about this, make it nice and tight, we are going to cut whatever's hanging off of here. Okay. See that? So now what we're going to do is, we actually had a lot of this. If you felt that you wanted to add more, go for it. Add more. Make it crazy. Not crazy, you know what I mean. Add more. You want to add more? Sure. Why not? You already have the product, add the other product. See that? If you were to add more, you could definitely do that. Or like I said, if you're using different product, it's also awesome. It all depends on what you want, what you like. Okay, so we have this. Now what we're going to do is we are going to add our bow. So the bow, I'm going to add it using one of the pipe cleaners that we have. So I'm going to use a red pipe cleaner because in this case you are going to see it a little bit. And I'm going to add it right in the point where the wire is, right in the middle. I'm going to try to make it somewhat even because I'm going to wrap it around this right here. I'm going to add it towards the middle, and just pay attention the way that your tails are going. Are your tails facing the correct direction? Do you want to turn your bow maybe the way you're applying it, the way you're attaching it rather? And as you're doing this, you might actually want to add more ribbon to it. See that? Actually, I'm adding it to the wrong side. Sorry, friends. There we go. I knew something was off. Okay. See that? Okay. So now that it's wrapped around there, simply twist it. I like to give it a twist, and then I like to continue to wrap it up. So I'm using another small zip tie. I'm going to add 2 of them, just to secure it better. More secures the anchor a little bit better. One is above the bow, kind of towards the bottom of the bow, and I'm going to add another one to the top to just make it even with the whole arrangement that we made. And yes, if you notice, these are a little bit smaller. It's okay. This is what I had close by. It's not a big deal if you have smaller ones or big ones. I didn't have the bigger ones close by. Okay, see how that is in the back now? We're going to cut that. Make it a little bit tighter. And this is pretty much done. We just have to make it prettier fluff things up. Sorry, my hair's going crazy. And start bending things around. If you feel that, remember what I said before, while you're working with it, if you wanted to make it a little bit smaller to make it look even poofier so that you'd have that big space in between the bow, you could just compress it a little bit. But once we have it at this point, look how pretty. We could just start lifting things, moving them around. Remember, you can't do this with natural florals. This is when I get excited. You see when I'm getting excited? When it all comes together. Okay. We cut items. We cut stems when we were fixing it before, right? We cut mostly on the top. Just remember that you might have some sticking out in the bottom here or at the top. Cut those guys out. In this case, this little leaf that I have here is connected. One of the geranium leaves. I actually like it, but I have a feeling like it's gonna pop out. I want to try to leave it and just cut it. Just cut it slightly. Look, if you could see that. Oh, we lost the bud. It's okay. We'll add it. We'll re-add it. Little bud fell out. It's okay. Got a little bit of glue to it. Trying to see where it came from. It's okay. So we are going to. I'm just gonna cut it. I'm gonna cut right below where that leaf is. If I'm able to. I don't think it's letting me. I like the geranium leaves. They're pretty. And since we have geraniums, this guy doesn't want to come off. The reason this guy doesn't want to come off is because I should just pull it. See that? I can re-add it afterwards. So I'm going to cut this. Okay, friends, I'm going to change this. Because this guy does not want to cut, I'm going to bend it back up because I'm afraid that the flowers will fall out. So we're going to bend it back up and zip tie it back. Because the last thing that we want to have, see, situations happen. See that? And we are going to add another zip tie to it to make sure that it's secure there. Okay. Okay, so once you have all this, once you have everything together, you're just gonna fluff everything up. And the final piece, if you want, when you want to finish it, you could take one of the geranium leaves that you have, cut off the little piece that's to the end because you only want the leaf. We're going to cut that. You're not really going to see this. You could do it with ribbon if you don't want to use one of your leaves. And we're going to add it to the back. So after we have all this together now, what we want to do is, what I personally like to do is I like to add glue. I like to add glue to all of this to secure it because we don't want it to fall apart. Not that it's gonna fall apart because there's a lot of zip ties and everything, but let's just add more glue to it so that way it's super secure, super sealed, and we don't have to worry about it going anywhere. Some glue. You could also have done this step before you added the bow if you wanted to. I personally like to wait till the end when everything I know is exactly where I want it to be, and then I add that glue. So then, because we're finally going to add this to a lantern, right? We don't want to be able to see the mechanics of it in the back. So like I was saying is, you take a leaf, add a little bit of glue to it. Oops, sorry. And you're going to cover the back. right there. Or you could use ribbon if you don't want to use your leaves. Use some ribbon to cover it. A good thing to mention is when you're working with this, make sure that all your zip ties are pointing in up to the top here. Those are just another pointer to another little tip to point out, because if the ends of your zip ties are outward, once you cut them, it's going to be kind of hard to attach to your lantern, or it will scratch the lantern. So have them all facing inward, or up rather, because if I was facing my lantern swag like this, then all the tops of the zip ties are going to be going up, facing up. Okay, so now doing that. If it doesn't want to attach, I always end up wrapping it around. I'm okay with wrapping it. That's okay. And if it adds to the look, even if it pops up a little bit, it adds to the look. Okay. So again, now this is your opportunity to start fluffing things, making them look a little bit prettier. Remember, you cannot do this with a natural floral. So to give your ribbon a little bit of curl, let's give it a little bit of a pull. If you want to cut your ribbon, go for it, cut it. This is the opportunity also to cut your ribbon ends. If you want to cut it, you want to dovetail it, you want to dovetailing, meaning that you cut at an angle, make that little triangle at the end, the little dart type thing. Or if you want to, I personally like to leave just angles. See that? Now we had left over one little leaf that we could add here. We also had this little guy that fell. We could add it in the middle. Or because we still had some of this stuff, this greenery, say stuff, we could cut a piece of it. Remember, these are up and down. So I'm going to take one of the stems that it has. Not have to go crazy. I could just find one of the tops here. See that? And I just push it out. Let's see if it comes out. These are very, very, very well made. Actually, no. Is it gonna come out? I don't think it's gonna come out. I'm gonna have to cut it. These are very well made. Nope, doesn't want to come. Does not want to come out, friends. Does not want to come out. I'm gonna cut it then. Okay, so I'm gonna cut it, and you'll see why I'm cutting it. You do not have to do this. This is something that I want to do to add a little bit more greenery to the bow. So I'm gonna cut it right towards the bottom. And all I'm gonna do here is I'm gonna glue this guy. Maybe cut it a little bit shorter. But do you see that? Just add a little bit of greenery. I could take this one and cut it in a couple of places. Should leave it like that. I'm gonna use my glue gun, add a little bit of glue to the end. See that? Just adds a little bit of greenery to it. Okay, so how are we gonna attach? Okay. So now we have our lantern swag. It is pretty. You did a great job. You did a very, very great job. Aren't you proud of yourself? Look at that. And remember, everything is not going to look exactly the same. Yours isn't going to look like mine. Even if you have the same exact product, they're all different. We're all different. We think differently. We work differently. They're going to look different. But now we need to figure out a way to attach this to our lantern, right? Okay. So the way that I like to add them is by using the coiled wire. I'm going to take this coiled wire, rustic wire, and we're going to measure out about 18 inches. 18 inches is about right. Okay. If you want to go a little bit bigger, go 20. You could always cut it. Okay. Mine's a little bit crazy, but that's besides the point. Doesn't matter. We could just leave it. Okay. So I'm going to find the middle. I'm going to fold this in the middle, right? And now I'm going to go to the top of my swag. to the top of my swag, but I'm gonna find like the lowest point at the top of my swag, and I'm going to wrap this around it, facing it downward. See that? And then I'm going to wrap it in, make it like a knot. See that? And you could do it 2 times, you could do it 1 time. See that? Do you see how I did that? See, you can see a little bit closer how I did. So once that's like that, once it's there, you could add a little bit of glue to it to make sure, secure it a little bit more. But now, friends, you are finished. This is done now. So now, if you wanted to add a little bit more greenery, see how I added that little green guy there? We can add more. If you want to make sure that your ribbon is facing the direction you want it to be, if you want to cut your ribbon a little bit more, see we have this guy up here that needs a little bit of love up there. Let's cut it, give it an angle. See that? Okay, so now I might want to add another one of those little green things. We can put that later. Okay, so how do we add it to a lantern? The way that I like to add it to the lantern, well, it depends on your lantern, right? It all depends on your lantern. But before we do that, remember, keep fluffing it, keep fluffing it. If you feel that some of these tails are too long, cut them, curl them. This is yours. It's all how you want it to be. Okay? Just make sure that those geraniums don't get lost because they're the focal point. Okay? So we have that. Move them around. Okay, so I'm going to use my big lantern. Let's bring it up. And simply, the way to attach it is grab that. See that? And you're just gonna bend, you're just gonna make a nice little twist on it. It is not gonna go anywhere. Believe me, it is not gonna go anywhere. I use these on a lamppost that I have outside my home. It's just a post, actually, not even a lamppost. It's a post, and I add them, and it goes through rainstorms in the summer, in the winter, in the fall, and they still keep on kicking. Coiled wire, rustic wire. It is very, very strong. As long as you make it 2, 3 little tight turns on it, it's not gonna go anywhere. Okay, so now that it's on your lantern, if you want to give it a little bit of a bend, you could do that, and then just start fixing it a little bit more. Move it around. And when I say move it around, I made the items, the pieces of your greenery. I might move this ribbon on this direction. Like I was saying before, some might be a little bit too short, some might be a little bit too long. If you want to cut something, now I'm going to do it now. If you want to bend these a little bit, and everyone is going to look different on the lantern, so the lantern also determines how it's going to look. So this is obviously a bigger lantern. If I were to use the same item on a smaller lantern, it is obviously going to look bigger. For example, if I were to add it down here, see how it looks much bigger on this lantern. So it all depends. It all depends on how you're gonna, where you want to display it. Our final product ended up being over 24 inches still, even though we ended up squishing it a little bit. But there you go. And there you are. If you have any more of your own greenery or florals, or like I said before, if you wanted to add more of these guys, to add a little bit more greenery to it, it'll actually look very pretty if you add some greenery to it, because it breaks up the pattern of the ribbon. Oh, look at how pretty that is. Look at what we made. Again, play with it. It's yours. However you want to make it work, however you want to make it look, it's yours. So here is your final product. I would love to see what it looks like. Feel free to send us messages and send us photos of your final product. Love to know what you think. Love to know what it looks like and how you felt about creating this geranium lantern swag. Thank you so much for your time. We hope you had fun doing it. Sure I did. Thank you. Take care.